moving into the space age. But we're not driving to a lunar outpost. Those weird domes, capped like snowy plum puddings, are the eyes and ears of the West's defense. It's not the moon, but a remote Yorkshire moor we're visiting. An out-of-the-way spot, summer or winter.
Yes, thank you very much, strange old English reporter. He's talking about RAF Fylingdales there, which is a RAF base just inland from where I'm standing now on Scarborough Beach. It's an RAF base which was tasked with providing a continuous early warning system against ballistic missiles back in the day. I think it still does the same thing now, they don't say too much about it. And it used to be very recognisable for, as the nice man was saying there, the gigantic golf ball-like radar stations. They've dispensed with those quite a while ago now and instead erected something that looks like a giant cheese grater. Not exactly inconspicuous, but when has Yorkshire ever been that? Love to be Yorkshire. Anyway, we'll get on to that a little bit more when I talk about today's guests. In the meantime, hello, believers. Hope you're well. It's been a while, hasn't it? Welcome to this special edition of Believe Me, the podcast where creative folk talk about their processes and try not to get lost in the comings and goings of the greatest TV show of all time, The X-Files. How have you been? The world continues to change around us, doesn't it? Mostly for the worse, I'm sad to say. It's hard to know where to turn, isn't it? Or if indeed we should just set up camp outside RAF Fylingdales. But here we are, and we soldier on where we can. And I hope these 60 minutes offer you, the listener, a bit of a respite from your own stresses as well as what's going on globally. A couple of shout-outs I've got to do before we get onto the chat. Firstly, big shout-out to the NHS, who helped my wee boy recently when he had to go in for emergency surgery. The doctors and nurses there actually did such a good job that Lenny did not want to come home. Didn't trust his parents as much as the team there to look after him, so thank you to them. A couple of other Edinburgh-centric things to share. Filmhouse will be opening its doors in June. Very excited to get in there and see what the incredible team behind that resurrection has done with the help of goodness knows how many supporters and the whole Open the Doors campaign. Also, hello to anyone listening in Ghana. I had an email this week from one of those stats companies who tells me that this podcast is in the top 200 of podcasts in Ghana. In the arts sector, I should say. Let's not go wild. But thank you if you're listening in Ghana. I don't know too much about Ghana. Did a bit of research before speaking to you today. Big cocoa exporters in Ghana. I should probably know more about the Ghanaian film industry, shouldn't I? I'll look into that. Anyway, someone who probably does know a lot more about Ghana than me is today's very well-travelled guest. It's the journalist, writer, poet, musician, entomologist and northern powerhouse Gary Hartley. Gary studied journalism with me at the University of Sheffield many moons ago before embarking on creative endeavours such as becoming a performance poet under the name Gary from Leeds, performing all across the UK with shows such as Yet-I and Gary-baldi. Gary ran a literary magazine called The Alarmist for many years before uprooting to Greece and then taking a left turn to study a master's in entomology. That's insects, not entomology. I've made that mistake on many an occasion. Although he is a wordsmith in his own right, as we'll get on to, he now writes as a journalist, covering the natural world for outlets such as The Observer and The New Scientist. In the chat, Gary talks about returning to journalism, chipping away at the coalface of the spoken word circuit, why we need to love our six-legged neighbours, that's insects, again, I'm talking about there, his international outlook, northernisms, and we still get time to talk about the first X-Files film, Fight the Future, in which Mulder and Scully, who've been removed from their usual jobs, looking into the X-Files, are now investigating the bombing of a building, but they soon uncover what appears to be a government conspiracy attempting to hide the truth about alien colonisation on Earth. And thank God they did. Why have we jumped 3 seasons of a TV show to this film, Chris? You might be asking. Well, listen in and you'll find out. I've often talked of having people on the podcast who I've known for many, many years, but that there's usually large sections of their life that I don't really have much of an idea about, and that's certainly the case here, and Gary gets into lots of interesting areas. As always, if you like the show, do like, subscribe, tell your mates, whether or not they live in Ghana. I hope to be back soon with new episodes in some capacity. But in the meantime, remember, it's free beer night at the Astrodome. Here's Gary. I've taken the liberty of starting this recording already because I don't want to miss any of this cold.
Yeah.
You do. I also absolutely love the fact that you signed in as miserable Gary.
I thought it was only appropriate to the task, really. Yeah.
How are you doing? First off.
Yeah, I'm absolutely knackered, to be honest. It's like I used to have the ability to produce energy when travelling and stuff. I can't believe that I actually travelled the world when I was in my early 20s. It just seems like a different human being. I mean, I've just been basically in Vienna for 2 months. I've been around a bit, like went to Slovenia and Croatia for about 10 days and stuff. But like, really, I haven't actually done that much, you know. I just come back and I'm like, I'm absolutely broken. I'm like, you know, I don't even have any dependents or anything, so like I can't imagine what it's like for you and other people with little ones. Like, just does it sort of raise your energy levels when you're traveling, or have you just not bothered? Or
not traveling. I mean, sometimes it does. There is an element of like, I've only got this finite amount of time. You know, I've got like an hour when I'm not wiping arses or you know, getting kids out of the bath, or I mean, we've just got an N64, mate, so we're playing a lot of Mario. On Fridays I'm on Zoom chats with like folk from work, and they're talking about going out and, you know, enjoying themselves. I was like, I just like gonna lay down for a bit. That's what I enjoy, you know. We're in bed about 9 every night just reading. That's a joy.
I haven't quite cracked to that degree. You know, my better half is definitely a 9 o'clock sort of sleeper, and I did attempt this, but it didn't work out well. So.
Yeah. So what are you in Vienna for? Was that work related, or was that you just travelling around?
No, I don't. No, I wish it is. Basically, I'm in no demand at all. It's like it's all her. Like she was there doing part of her PhD. Which is kind of a crossover research psychotherapy thing, and she was at Sigmund Freud University doing all kinds of fancy stuff, and she's off to Bosnia in a while, you know. Like, I think I'll probably be following her there. So basically, like, yeah, I'm not in demand at all, you know. I tried to make contact with some research institutions and stuff in Austria while I was there, and they were just kind of like, look at the fucking website, mate.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Do you want me? Yeah, I was like, of course he's it. When you said I'm in Vienna, I was like, of course he is.
Yeah, I say that, but like Vienna, I mean, Austria was about as indifferent as it could possibly be to my entreaties and trying to dig out some kind of story while I was there. But I did do some quite interesting stuff in Slovenia.
I don't want to. Well, I'm going to describe as a Renaissance man because the journey that you've been on in your life is like, I would never put your sort of interest together in a million years, and it's wild where all that's come from. So I'm really interested to know. I guess first off, I'm interested to know about writing to start with, and then we get on to insects and poetry and what have you. But when did you first kind of realise you could write and enjoy writing?
I think it's kind of the only thing I've ever really been good at. to be honest, I mean, you know, like at school, it was always the thing that I guess I got the positive reports on and stuff. I can't really remember whether my parents sort of pushed it or whatever. I did have quite a pushy father, so he may well have done. It was one of those kind of like you know, working class done good kind of guys who you know, insisted that education was the most important thing, and basically you know, if he could, he'd just lock us all up with our books, and that'd be that for the entirety of childhood and possibly adolescence as well. But it's sounding like I had abusive childhood here, so maybe cut this bit. But no, I was always sort of writing stories as a kid, and I can remember that I had something like, you may not actually believe that this age existed, but there was an age where like newspapers would publish stories by children, you know, like just made up shit. And I can remember having this like story about like animals in the jungle published, and it was like I don't know, I was writing like the way I was writing when I was like 9 or 10 years old, it sounded like I was from the Victorian times or something. I was like using all these kind of mad sort of archaic vocabulary and stuff. It was weird. So yeah, I was always into stories, I suppose, and just never was that good at the numbers side of things. Saying that, I did massively, you know, via accident or just kind of having no free will. I sort of ended up doing science again at a much later point.
And because we studied journalism together, and a part of me doing that was like, well, I can't do an English degree, can I? You know, there's almost like a kind of working class guilt of like, you've got to use this writing talent to some form of career. You can't possibly go and learn for learning's sake, you know. Was there anything like that in your family?
I think 100%, and I think it didn't even need to be said, you know, explicitly by your parents for you to kind of have that feeling that you know you had to do something that had a sort of practical application. And I don't know, I think I was a bit deluded when I did the journalism course, because I thought it would be quite creative. It just wasn't. It just fucking wasn't, was it? It was just it was just like, here's where you're right, and if you don't do it like this, it's you're doomed. And then it was the same for broadcast as well. It was a very specific way of putting everything together. Did you get the impression that like on the broadcast elements, they were trying to like squeeze our northern accents out?
Well, that's interesting. No, I didn't, and that's like, I guess, flies in the face of what the BBC in particular are trying to instill a bit more, because they're being forced to, you know, regional output or what have you. But I don't know. I only went to like 1 in 5 lectures, mate. Because I'm a bloody hard guy. I wish I'd gone to more.
But you know, you're a true artist, aren't you, Chris? So you weren't
right, yeah, right.
You weren't going to put up with that nonsense. You know, you weren't going to be put in a box. You were going to talk about people who thought they were horses and see if you could get away with it.
Yeah. Well, maybe there's like, I think you're probably right that there's that I did as well think it was going to be more creative than it was, and I was like, oh right, this is what I'm being kind of pigeonholed into now. And you know, at the time there was so much else going off in Sheffield where we both studied. There was, you know, music and other areas that kind of seemed more exciting in a way, and like you say, didn't put you in a box. But it's not that I still used what I learned on the course every day. If only I learnt, you know, stuff about being able to not waffle and, you know, write in a sort of, why write 10 words when you can write 5 words. So I kind of still use that. I always got the sense from most of the people on the course that they'd gone into it definitely wanting to be a journalist, and knew the kind of trajectory of, you know, and some people from that course are like quite high up in, you know, big UK focused broadcast media at the minute. So they got out of it what they wanted to. But like you say, I don't think there was much space for people who went, oh, I'm quite like writing and I want to explore that. You sort of kind of got left behind a little bit. But
yeah, and I don't know if you can remember, but just some of those people, I don't know, like it's again, I'm just going to be slagging people off. I'm going to seem like the most bitter man.
I'll just do like a beep.
But I don't know if you went to any of the seminars and stuff, like the quality of the discussions was so fucking low. Like nobody had any real developed thoughts on anything, and it just inspired me to just sort of like just try and provoke, like be a devil's advocate, like try and support positions that I didn't believe in, just to try and get something going in the seminars. But it never really worked, you know. Yeah, and I think that it just kind of, I guess it just sort of it frightened me a little bit that these people who are most keen on, you know, being supposedly the people that hold power to account actually didn't have that many thoughts.
Right. No, you know what? And it's I've noticed a similar thing in the film industry where certainly the film publicity sector, where a couple of people have, I mean, one person in particular I used to work with that now lives in London, and moved down from Scotland to there, and it's quickly become apparent to him that most people who work in film publicity just don't watch films.
Wow.
You know, they just don't. I don't know why you would get into it. Like, maybe people think it's glamorous and you get to walk on a red carpet, and yeah, you do. But that's like 30 seconds of your life, and the rest of the time is spreadsheets and the inside of hotel rooms, and you know, it's not glamorous. So if you're not actually enjoying sitting down and watching cinema and getting excited by cinema, I don't really know why you would do it. But
yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I'm trying to say that, like, oh, I'm so different here. But like, you know, like I didn't do journalism. You know, after finishing the course for many years and just floated around in London, you know, trying to do performance while working in you know, fairly mundane press office jobs, really, for organisations. I kind of come back to it in just full circle, really. Like, in the sense that, like, I was in Greece, and all of a sudden I decided that, you know, insects were the thing, and I just felt this kind of strong urge to come back and do that. And then I tried to sort of make it in the sort of like the professional sector of, you know, the insect world, I guess, and that didn't really work out either. So I kind of came back to journalism because I was just like, well, I still find this stuff fascinating, but, you know, the writing is the stuff that I fit into best, I guess. So I've tried to just, you know, can't make a living out of just writing about insects. I'd love to, but but yeah, I've had to just, you know, broaden my horizons and think about farming and fish and all that stuff. But yeah, no, I think I kind of came back to it for the right reasons, but probably at the wrong time, I would say, as well, in a way. You know, if it a bit.
Are you finding it difficult to get work away?
I mean, it's, look, as kind of a recent example, I don't know if you saw the piece I had in the Observer the other week about rewilding in the UK. On so many levels, the kind of process involved in that says a lot about you know, where things are going in terms of the media at the moment. You know, I was dealing with an editor who I work really well with. He's a very good editor of the review section of Observer, but he's left, I think, now. Like, he was leaving because they've been taken over by Tortoise Media, who if a private eye to be believed, like, so many staff have left the Observer that they're basically struggling to fill their website when they launch it. So he was, you know, preparing to leave, and he was like, yeah, you know, I like your stuff. This seems like a good idea. Let's kind of pan it out and work together. And so it was like a good process, but there was a kind of a finality about it, and I don't know where Tortoise are going to stand, and I definitely hope they don't hear me say what I've just said on this podcast. If they are hiring any sort of freelancers who work in the kind of wildlife sector of things, but then so I got that all done, but that's, you know, the last time I'm ever going to be in the Guardian Observer, because it doesn't effectively exist anymore since yesterday. But then there's kind of additional sort of signal of where things are at, because a few days later, someone who was actually in the story was like, "Have you seen this in Vice?" And you know, you well know that Vice has, like, technically not been I think, for maybe 5-6 years now. But Vice.com still exists as some kind of like strange ghost ship, and I don't really know who's running it. But journalists are still publishing stuff there in kind of a Vice style, which I don't know who's funding it. I don't know what's even going on. Are they doing it partially through AI? Certainly. But anyway, this person got in touch with me and was like, this person has just ripped off your story with no attribution.
Wow. Right.
And I was like, surely that can't be true, but it was entirely true. Like they just did, all the people that were quoted in my article quoted it. There was no backlink to the original story. Nothing. But the weirdest thing about it is, it seemed like they'd kind of taken the quotes from my piece and kind of youthed them using AI, which was
God, that's depressing.
really bizarre. So like, I struggle to explain that, and as a geriatric millennial, I'm gonna probably struggle to do that anyway. But yeah, just like they kind of made the quotes kind of more like knockabout style. Like, and the whole thing was just so fucking bizarre, and in the end I managed to get hold of the person who'd written it. I didn't think they existed, actually. I thought they might not be a person, they might be AI, but I got in touch with the person, and it ended up getting like backlinked properly, and saying where the source was and things like that. But it's just a real mess at the moment.
Oh my God.
And there are still some organisations doing great stuff, and it's really good to see that like investigative journalism is still getting funded, albeit a lot of it's sort of crowdfunded and through charitable sources and stuff like that. But seeing like Bureau of Investigative Journalism doing good stuff and things like that is kind of encouraging. And yeah, I think I would like to get more into the kind of investigative side of things, because if the state of the world at the moment doesn't kind of show you that like more taking account needs to be done rather than less, then it is quite a scary time, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'm pleased you said that, because we've often texted after we've separately watched a film about investigative journalists, thinking, oh, we've strayed far from the path here, haven't we? We've come out of spotlight going, what are we doing? Every time I put on All the President's Men, it's like we should be holding the feet of power to the coals of, investigative journalism. But I didn't know about Vice, actually.
Yeah.
I knew they were doing more like, I see more video content pop up, and I'm probably like everybody else, are trying to do stuff on TikTok. But because the mag used to be, if you'd worked your way through all those naff fashion pieces and all that, from time to time do a really good piece, set in Nicaragua or somewhere like that, or they'd sent someone to the jungle to uncover
and
something.
like the irony of the whole thing there, there was totally a time where I would have like walked over hot coals to get a piece in Vice. So it's kind of like a sort of at the end of days I somehow have, without being properly attributed for it. But yeah, no, it's, I mean, look, there's still stuff going on, and there are still people publishing stuff about the things I write about, the natural world, the unnatural world, the kind of intersection between the natural world and us, like that, but yeah, you can't deny that it's tough.
Where did that interest come from then? Is that something you've had from a kid as well? Because I was thinking back to one of your musical projects, was called Red Admiral, and then that just clicked, and I was like, oh, this is... Because when you said, I'm going off to do an MA in entomology, I was like, again, I went, of course he is, but like, it's not like, it's no mean feat, is it, getting on that course? And then having to actually do the course, so I thought, this is obviously something that he's had with him for a long time. Yeah,
for sure. I don't know if this is something that happens to a lot of us, but like when I was a kid, I was super interested in insects as well as amphibians and reptiles and all the rest. But I don't know what really happened. I think it was a combination between like struggling a bit with maths. Like I wasn't like bottom of the class, but it wasn't. I just never, numbers never really clicked with me in the same way that words did, and it kind of put me off pursuing sciences, even if maybe I wanted to. And I think that's kind of coupled with, and I think it maybe is still going to be an ongoing problem, which is just like that people associate insects with childhood. like an interest in it.
Yeah.
Like, and so I got to a certain age and started to feel embarrassed, I think, about the fact that you know, this was something that I am quite passionate about. So it just kind of, it was always something at the back of the mind, and I've always like been fascinated when I've seen things out in the field, when I've just been, you know, walking in the middle of nowhere or whatever. But it just, I never really thought to pursue it in a meaningful sense. And it just, I think just something about the time of my life when I was in Greece, I don't know, it was kind of like vulnerable in a good way for something to just catalyse out of nothing, basically, because I just felt I was kind of drifting out there. You know, I'd done a couple of Edinburgh shows, and like I was quite disappointed with how the second one went, and I basically just decided to give up performing. And London had become increasingly expensive, and I was moving further and further out of the city, paying more and more money for, you know, stranger and stranger scenarios. By the end, I was like living with a couple and their kid, and it was a bit, you know, odd. So I, you know, I just kind of legged it essentially, but without any real plan, and so I just tried to sort of subsist on bits of PR and journalism here and there in Greece. And it was actually, you know, it was kind of outside of me that sort of where I found this kind of link again to something that had been lying dormant. Like a friend of mine in Greece was running these nature tours up in the Lake Prespa area, which is like bordering Albania, Greece, North Macedonia, all those guys. And it's like, it's fucking amazing up there. Like, I'm just really, really unexplored, partly because those regions are quite underfunded and things like that. So neither tourism or ecology is taken off to the degree that you would imagine it would when you go there. But I was like trying to help him with some tours and visiting various places and things. But while I was there, you know, the people he did the tours with were ecologists, but the majority of them were interested in birds, as is the case with a lot of the ecotourism. Ecotourism is driven by birders, essentially. Yeah. But while they were all looking up and looking at the trees and listening for rustles in bushes, I was just like staring at the floor the whole time, going, fucking hell, I've never seen so many insects in my life.
People distracted by the old charismatic megafauna above.
There was a bit of that, and I just realised that kind of that sort of enthusiasm had never gone away. And I was like, you know what am I doing? What am I doing here in Greece? And I just saw, you know, a few people in Athens, which I just thought had kind of gone there to kind of give up, because it was a relatively cheap place to live, and you can sort of go and sort of live in entropy forever if you want to, you know. I was like, am I ready for entropy? I'm not sure that I am. You know, as yet, I might be at a later point, but and so I kind of I just thought, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna apply to do an MSc and see what happens. And so I went back to England to do my interview, and I was interviewed by the now late Professor Simon Leather, who was a bit of a legend, and he died a couple of years ago actually, which is pretty sad and a loss for a lot of things, really. But like, it's a bit of a divergence there. But I was interviewed by him, and he was got a very like dry sense of humour, and like towards the end, he was just like, you know what, I need to check, Gary. Have you just like gone mad or something?
Right.
It's like, because, you know, doing whatever you were doing in Greece and performing and doing a journalism degree a decade ago, pivoting to entomology is not what we usually deal with here, you know. So I kind of, I think my response to that was like basically yes. But is that okay if I kind of apply myself to this this thing? So that's kind of how it went down. So I was given a place and came back to England, and just sort of dug in, despite being like the oldest on the full-time course by about a decade. Just I was like,
fantastic,
just like Grandad Gary over there in the corner.
Yeah, what was it like in the old days, 1993? I mean, how long have we known each other now? 25 years.
Yeah.
But you've always struck me as someone, and what you've talked about exemplifies this, who's had an international outlook. Where did that come from? Is that something from your family as well, or did you develop that at university, or did you think, oh God, I've got to get out of Leeds, or have you always been interested in that, in international development and what have you? Or
I can't really give a very intellectual answer to this whatsoever. That I think it comes from two things. Like, one, when I was growing up, I just repeatedly did this jigsaw of the world map.
Right.
With all the flags and capital cities and stuff, and it's weird how such a thing would get in your head. And the second thing on that, it is just like a really anti-intellectual reason for internationalism is that it's football. I've got to be honest, mate.
Right. Yeah. And your family, are they all football fans as well?
Absolutely not. None of them. Everyone in my family, my immediate family, thinks it's just totally bizarre and kind of an aberration, really. Yeah. My dad was one of those guys who just worked, really, worked and did things with the family. He had no real interests, so wanted to work. So when I started wanting to go to Leeds games and stuff, he kind of went there grudgingly, to be honest.
Right.
I was quite pleased when a next door neighbour who babysat for us when we were growing up showed an interest in taking me instead. It was kind of a get out of jail for my dad, really.
Right, interesting.
Yeah. So all those kind of European games in these strange cities and far out places just led me to looking into what those places were about, I suppose, and then it sort of spiraled from there. So I can't say that my family have a massively international outlook, and I was very and other than those kind of really basic kind of things that they were my exposures really to those things.
Would you it's hard, we all identify in different ways, and maybe it's a bit reductive to say one thing or another, but do you feel like a northerner? Do you feel like an English person? Do you feel like a British person, or none of those, or European, or do you feel like none? You just feel like Gary?
Yeah, that's a question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I feel it's hard not to feel British. We've kind of exported our language everywhere, and and I definitely don't feel like I wouldn't say I feel English. I had this strange conversation because I was talking to this Swedish guy in Vienna last week, and he's like, "Oh no, I've got to get this right, haven't I? Are you Scottish, Welsh, English?" I'm like, I don't give a fuck, mate. Go with whatever you prefer. But it's very hard to not feel your Britishness, particularly when you're abroad. As much as I've tried learning a number of languages, I'm not fluent in anything other than my mother tongue. To my shame, I can get by in a few, but not express my personality or anything like this. And when you meet these actual true internationalists, from the Scandinavian countries or Belgium or whatever, it just puts you to shame. And you're like, we're not Europeans compared to them. They're the Europeans. So I think anyone who makes that claim really as a British person is pushing it a bit.
Yeah, it was funny. I went to see it's a show we've been working on. There's a film called Restless Natives from the 80s, which is a Scottish film about two young Leith guys, and it ends up becoming a bit of a Robin Hood story. So they go out, one wears a clown mask, one wears a wolfman mask. They go out on this motorbike and they rob coaches full of American tourists, and just to line their own pockets. But then they start giving this money away, and then they end up becoming Scottish folk heroes. So this film had been turned into... I didn't really know the film until I moved up here, but people speak about it along the same lines as Local Hero or Gregory's Girl. And but the team behind that film had turned it into a musical, and I went to see the musical on Sunday, and it's packed in Perth, but they really brought out this idea of being a Scottishness, and how these two characters fit into this whole idea of folklore, and they kept talking about heroes between the hills, and it touched very lightly on what it means to be Scottish. But I did feel like, it's nice, isn't it? That's nice. The collectively, if you identify as being Scottish, it feels so like stirring in your gut. In some ways, Scotland feels more accepting in a way of other people than I've ever felt in England, maybe, but in a way that I guess because of the rise of people like Reform or what have you that have in ways appropriated Englishness, it's difficult to say you're English and not feel a bit sheepish about it, which is a shame, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best statement I think of the kind of tawdry perceptions that maybe people have of like the St George's flag, and that is like down the road from me towards a beach in Scarborough. There's basically like a sort of derelict site with hoardings around it, and someone had just like scrawled "Happy St George's Day" and the flag on it, it just this kind of slightly insane handwriting, and I'm like, yeah, that's it all over, isn't it? It's like.
I was Scarborough these days. You only been back a couple of days, have you?
Yeah. Just been back. Got straight in the sea. Like if you don't get straight back in the sea, you never will you? Because it's fucking horrendous. I mean, in a beautiful way, in a restorative way. Yeah. But I think what a bit of what is lost in that wild swimming crowd is that it's actually awful, isn't it? So you have to be. There's masochism there. It's not all joy. It's just you have to have a bit of the sort of pleasure pain stuff in you to do it.
There was a program on the radio, and there was an anaesthetist on that this weekend talking about the benefits of wild swimming, and he was talking about how it raises your stress hormones, obviously because you've gone in fucking freezing water, and then from that point on, if people get really into it, it's a way to manage stress throughout the rest of your life, because you can kind of channel it a bit more in the same way as you do when you're in -5 degree water or what have you. But he's doing a big study on it at the minute. But there's definitely something to it, I think, because I've only done it a little bit, but if I've ever done it, I've come out feeling good in myself, and a bit clearer, in the same way as if I go for a run or something, I come back and go, I just feel a bit more together now. But
yeah,
is that why you started doing it?
I think part of why I did it was just because the sea was there.
Yeah.
But saying that, I was in the rivers and stuff of the start of the Peak District in Sheffield before that. So no, there must have been something there. But I don't know. Really drives it. To be honest, I think. Well, I mean, to be frank, I have kind of suffered with poor mental health at times in my life, and anything that seems to have like any impact whatsoever, even if it's minor, I will explore. And just like, it's nice to be sort of really kind of shocked into your body sometimes. I think it is another thing, because you can just kind of go around passively not really paying attention to what your body's saying, but if you put it in a sort of a severe state of shock for a bit, you're like, all right, you're here, and all those chemical reminders are lurking, and I should pay more heed to that in a more ambient sense in just my normal life, really. So it's just basically your body reminding you that it's always there.
Before we get onto some high density X-Files chat, I just wondered if we might see a return of Gary from Leeds, your alter ego, at any point, and if you miss performing, or and if you're doing any writing at the minute in terms of poetry.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't think I'll be making a comeback. Like, the thing is, it's like, I did make a random one in a gig in Manchester about, 18 months, 2 years ago, but it was just a one-off. Like, I felt the whole thing had become quite unhealthy for me, really. I'd become really dependent on that sort of adrenaline hit, and the come downs in between were getting quite bad, and I think I was just becoming quite a sort of a bitter person about other people's relative success and stuff. So I don't really want to get back into that person that I was there, you know, just sort of digging so much into yourself. It's just like a really deeply egotistical experience, and I think I'm prone to being quite egotistical at the best of times, so I shouldn't do anything that really encourages it. I wouldn't be against just going back and saying some words in front of people and kind of like an ad hoc thing if they wanted me to. But yeah, I haven't really had the interest too much in going back and doing that in a major way. I write now and again creatively. I wrote a script about basically about my dad dying in hospital, and hospices are quite.
Yes, we've not even got onto that. That's going to be a separate podcast.
A couple of years ago, and I sent it off to a few of those kind of new writing type of places and got like roundly rejected. But as you do, because thousands of scripts for each of these things, aren't there? And with just some suggestions on what to do with it. And I think kind of my ego was a bit bruised at the time, and you just really want to reject sort of good advice sometimes, don't you?
Yeah.
So I've come around to the idea that I should possibly go back to that and maybe make some changes. Like, even if there's no possibility of it ever being put on, I think that it's sort of maybe I owe it to myself to just make it as good as possible, just for the act of doing it, really. As far as poetry goes, again, it's just another one of those things, isn't it? It's like I write stuff. It's all in a Word document. I think I've got like I'm probably like one of the world leaders for half completed projects. Really, I've just got documents and documents of stuff.
Yeah.
That will never see the light of day, and because the publishing industry is kind of as much fucked as everything else is. It's not like you can do that thing where, you know, if you have like a tragic accident death, like no one's going to want to publish your work, you know.
Well,
like raid these archives for these gems, because there probably aren't any gems. It probably is as crap as I think it is.
It's romantic, that, isn't it? This idea of archives, you know, found all your work in an archive, you know, in the attic somewhere. But it's like, in reality, it's just, I've logged onto Gary's laptop now. He's gone and had a look on Google. Slightly less romantic.
Yeah, and there are some poems that I sort of like, and I would like to see published somewhere, but in a similar way to sort of other areas of publication. It's really difficult. I don't really know what's still going now. There are lots of the publications that I used to have things published in every now and again that just aren't going, and I don't really know what's replaced it. I can't really see that. I mean, maybe you're in touch with like what's going on in the sort of literary world, but I have got quite out of touch, and I don't know. And random Googling isn't really giving me much of a lead on where to look. I don't know, maybe a lot of people you've talked to on this podcast have been a lot more optimistic than me, but maybe, you know, given that you give me the name Miserable Gary, and maybe I've kind of hit the right note here. I would love to be more optimistic about things, but maybe I'm just not in the right circles anymore. I've kind of taken this pivot into the kind of nature and farming kind of world, and maybe the arts world has just passed me by. You know, I have no access to it, and it has no access to me, and maybe that's okay. Like maybe that's fine.
Yeah, sounds healthy to me though. That you've compartmentalized it a bit. You've gone, oh, that happened, and that was like things grew out of it, and it grew arms and legs, and it's just. I don't think there's any, even if I did, you know, I published no creative writing in a third party thing ever again. The fact that I did it, stood up in front of people and spoke these things that I've written down, and had some poems published and stuff, and ran, you know, the Alarmist magazine. It's all stuff that I did. I have no real regrets about any of it. Like, the whole landscape has changed dramatically since then, even in a decade or 15 years or whatever. And like, if I have no role to play in that kind of world, then I think I'm all right with it at this point. And the thing is, it's like you learn things about yourself and the way you do things that are useful in whatever you choose to do
from now. You know, it's I'm perhaps like over elaborating, but I've been, you know, I do some stuff with helping sort of refugees and asylum seekers in Scarborough with English, and, you know, like having some of those kind of ability to pivot on what kind of your audience has said and respond to that and try and engage people is like a lot of that comes from the performance side of things. And you know, when I was doing my masters, I had to do some kind of scientific presentations on little bits of research that I did in the course and things like that, and I was like always trying to get little jokes about ladybirds and shit, and it was like like I don't think anything is ever lost, is it really? You'll always find a way to kind of segue these sides of you into whatever it is that you happen to be doing.
Exactly. What is your relationship like with the X-Files? Do you have one? Is it positive or not?
Honestly, it was kind of something going on ambiently in the background when I was growing up. I knew that was the kind of like the socially accepted thing to do when I was at school, was to be into the X-Files, but again, it's going to make out like I had an abusive childhood, but my kind of television watching was quite kind of controlled when I was growing up.
Right.
And that I don't think that X-Files was on the approved list, and I can't really tell you why. So I knew there were these these two guys going around fighting government corruption and aliens and all kinds of stuff, but I really like, other than seeing other people's merchandise in the playground, I didn't really have a clue, to be honest.
Well, I really wanted to do an episode in which Scully ends up in a small town which is overrun by cockroaches, given your insect interest. But I thought, I'm going to end up not speaking to Gary for 3 years at this rate of podcast output. So we're not doing that episode. In fact, we skipped 3 seasons here from our last podcast chat. And we're going to be talking today about the first film, X-Files: Fight the Future. This, I mean, maybe I'll go back and do a whole précis of what happened to the last 3 seasons of X-Files, but Scully's been through the ringer. She's had a kind of alien cancer. I mean, by season 5, and it is a cracking season, de Cockney at one point gets out of a car and looks so fed up. You can just tell he's so sick of it, and they're sort of running out of steam slightly. So before we get to the film, the last episode of season 5, the X-Files themselves have been set on fire by the shadowy cigarette-smoking man. So this film starts when the X-Files are effectively shuttered, and we get Mulder and Scully looking into a potential bombing that's going to happen of a building, and they've just gone back to their usual FBI life. And then, obviously, because it's an X-Files film, we end up realising that there's more to that than meets the eye. There's the whole government conspiracy going on. There's alien colonization of Earth and what have you. Did you know any of that going into it? It's obviously like the X-Files, so there's going to be some aliens involved. But how did you find it sort of navigating the plot? And did you even care, really? Were you just kind of watching it from a like, this is interesting, this is a kind of antique?
I have to say though, like I'm very much a kind of prep guy, and when you told me that you wanted to do this, I watched a few episodes from various seasons. So basically, I did. Yes. I was watching the first and last of various seasons, because obviously back in the day they had such huge seasons of these shows. I was not prepared to take on like that much of my life being lost to the X-Files, but I was sort of bookending it, and which was quite a strange experience in itself, watching these series, just the start and the end. I was like, what the fuck happened there?
Right. But so you watched end of season 1, beginning of season 1, end of season 1, beginning of season 2, and like that.
Yeah. So I think I made it to season 3, so I haven't got the kind of ennui that you're describing in season 5 just yet. They seem to be still relatively into it when I kind of left it. But yeah, so I did a little prep, so I kind of know what I was dealing with. But also just in the same way that The Matrix has done it, it's like X-Files has just seeped into so much of our culture, and it's sad to say that even kind of like the political culture and the way people respond to things they don't understand in the world. I feel like The Matrix and X-Files seem to be referenced in a lot of this kind of conspiratorial style of thinking, which is kind of around today and has influenced a lot of our politics. So whether you've watched it or not, I feel you kind of know the overall thread of things, maybe.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, there's they kind of have a bit of a difficult job with this film because they try in the first 10 minutes to re-establish who Mulder and Scully are. So they're obviously thinking that maybe some people are going to come and see this film who've got no idea who Mulder and Scully are. So Scully says Mulder's name like 3 or 4 times when she doesn't need to. Oh, here you are, Mulder, here you are. And then they very quickly sort of dispense with that when they realise that the plot's going off in all manner of tangents. And you really do have to have some kind of dense X-Files historical knowledge to sort of follow what's going on, really. But I don't know if it might. I mean, there's certainly a bigger budget. You know, we get things exploding, we get flying saucers coming out of the ice in Antarctica. I mean, they've spent a lot of money. What they've not really done is they've not really developed the characters as such. You know, I felt like their boss Skinner in particular got sort of quite short shrift. He spends most of his time just sat on an FBI review board, like just looking a bit disproving. And then you've got Mulder's friends, the lone goodmen, who essentially just turn up, don't really proffer any kind of information about the whole arc or narrative, and are just used to kind of smuggle Mulder out of a hospital, really. So that's a bit of a shame. But I mean, you do get people like Martin Landau. He's in it. You know, he's a kind of a big name for to have in the X-Files, when most people in the X-Files are sort of not known. You know, they certainly weren't known actors when the X-Files started. But just from a kind of visceral point of view, were you thrilled? Were you bored? What was the general feeling?
I think if you view it as a comedy, it really, really works.
Yeah.
And you're going back to the kind of exposition elements. I really liked how in that a fairly early drunken bar scene with Mulder, like in that conversation with the bar woman, he basically does like a sort of a presentation on X-Files to date, doesn't it? Here's a summary from those who have absolutely nothing and have come into this film completely cold, in a slightly slurred, quite badly done sort of
speech. Enjoy that.
I like that. Just lots of it was good. I enjoyed the kind of bad guy doing lots of smoking in otherwise biosecure environments.
He didn't care, does he?
That was good. I have my own conspiracy theory that X-Files is like is a shill for like the dry ice / fake dust industry, because like every scene seems to be dependent on a huge cloud of something, sort of initially distorting it. I enjoyed all those things. And I guess that whole thing is quite 90s, isn't it? Like everyone emerging from some smoke or some dust. It's quite like John Woo. It's just minus the dove, I guess, a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, it was, building collapse, dust, and then, you're right, ice in Antarctica when they end up there, and then by the end, they're in the desert, so there's some more dust going on there. I mean, the one thing I got from it was they almost didn't trust themselves in terms of this idea of what this alien is. And the whole series has been that there's this sort of symbiote type, intelligent alien black goo. And if that gets in you, then that turns you end up doing what the alien wants. Now we're in a world where if the alien goo gets in you, you end up gestating it like the xenomorph, like Alien. So it's sort of there's a sort of like nest of humans underneath the ice in Antarctica when Mulder ends up there, who are sort of breeding these aliens that are at any point going to sort of pop out, and then you end up with an aggressive. This is the first time we've seen like an aggressive alien hybrid, and I felt like that was like, oh, you should have just trusted us, to kind of go along with it's interesting enough that there's a kind of conspiracy going on and there's all these different characters approaching it and that, but now you've got like, we must have a thrilling, gory aspect to it that I just didn't. I was like, that's a shame. That's a shame.
Yeah, and we didn't escape an insect angle in this one, though, did we? Did you know that was coming, the whole bees aspect?
Right, of course. Well, that is alluded to, yes. There's a big part of that. There's been some bee chat before, and the purpose of these bees are being used as a way to spread this virus or antivirus or what the government are doing. But did you feel that was scientifically accurate?
I wouldn't say so. No. I think it tied into some of those tropes which are still around today. Just like, insects are things to be feared, and there's also that kind of sort of vocabulary which I hope is kind of fading out a bit. There's sort of like the use of Africanized honeybees as being like, they're the aliens, they're the threat. Like there's some quite. I guess some quite insidious terminology that's been used in kind of mainstream culture around insects over the years, and that was certainly there in that sense. As much as I like to see insects in as much of culture as possible, often the portrayals are a little bit. Yeah, they're always a bad guy, aren't they? Invariably, whether they're sort of morphing into a giant thing in those kind of early B movies in the 1960s, or if they're getting into some sort of machine with Jeff Goldblum, or they're transferring genetically modified pollen in this. It's I like to think we've moved a little bit beyond that, but actually, in many ways we have, but it's still kind of a problem. Honeybees have this really, really they have such a positive. The public has such a positive opinion towards honeybees, which actually biases us against other bees, knowledge of other bees, the importance of their conservation and things like that. And the reality is that if you just place honeybees everywhere, they will outcompete all the kind of native pollinators that are around, or they can do. So like honeybees are great, yeah, but I think the kind of bias, the kind of positive trend that's come towards them has come at the expense of a lot of solitary bees and other pollinators around. So that's kind of quite a serious sort of tangent.
Absolutely fantastic. This is exactly what I hoped it would be.
So basically, I just ended up thinking about the bees quite a lot. And I guess my further point is that who needs to look at other planets, Chris? The aliens are among us. Let's understand our insect brethren before we start considering what's beyond there.
Absolutely wonderful. Do you think you will watch any more X-Files after this, or has this been enough to whet your thirst?
I feel like I've done my shift at the X-Files grindstone. If anyone suggested to watch the more recent movie, I potentially could get on board with that. If there was any, I was going to say if there was any contextual references with the original. I mean, we've just shown that there probably won't be. So. Have you kept a record of how many times the files were closed and reopened over the course?
Well, they close at the end of season 1, and then it doesn't. They don't get closed again until the end of season 5. But I'm still very foggy on life after Mulder. So I thought Mulder left when the X-Files closed. So I thought I was going into season 6 with no Mulder and Robert Patrick turning up, aka T-1000 from the Terminator film. But he didn't rock up until season 8. So I've got another 2 seasons of Mulder. And it's season 6 is sort of... they moved it to be filmed in LA because Duchovny wanted to be closer to his wife, Tia Leone. So it's a definitely different beast to the X-Files, because we've been used to soggy Canadian forests and, grim, sodden X-Files, and now we're in bright lights and everybody looks a lot more glamorous. So I'm reserving judgment about where the rest of the season's going, but... I'll still be in, mate. I'll drop you a line in 10 years' time if we're both still here.
I mean, that's a positive way to end.
Believe Me is written and edited by me, Chris Boyd, with production support from Steve Marshall. The music is by Johnny Boyle, and our logo is by Russ Brown. If you like the show, please do hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you out there next time.